Good morning from the campus of the United States Sports Academy in Daphne, Alabama. This is Sports Talk, a weekly presentation of the Academy and the Academy's Department of Communications. Thanks for joining in. I'm Dr. Arsvargan. I serve as moderator, and each week we engage a new topic in sport. We try to remain current. Sometimes we have to change scripts with very short notice. This week, we're going to take a look at the high cost of firing coaches in the Power 5 conference, plus Notre Dame in particular. This morning's panel consists of, to my right, Dean Stephen Butler, who's the Dean of Academic Affairs, and to my far right, Dean Tim Foley, who is the Dean of Student Services. You know, last week, with a million and one things going on, one item crept up and was carried by every news service, and that was the fact that Charlie Weis, who was fired from Notre Dame in 2009, actually was paid more in 2013 than his successor, Brian Kelly. So USA Today last week did a rather interesting piece in which it took a long, hard look at the departures of coaches from Southern Cal and Notre Dame. But in this day and age, when people are concerned about the cost of sport and players are concerned about, hey, where's my share? There are a number of things that we're going to look at this morning. So a little background. Let me begin. I mentioned that Southern Cal fired both Lane Kiffin, football coach, and Kevin O'Neill, basketball coach, in 2013. Their buyout clauses called for Southern Cal to pay a combined $2.2 million to those two coaches. And at the same time, USA Today reported that Charlie Weis was making more money in severance than the current coach, Brian Kelly. ESPN reported that the entire separation package, or buyout, would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 million for Charlie Weis. And payments to end the end of this December 15th, 2015. But it's not just those two high-profile schools. Let me give you an example also. Auburn University fired Gene Chizik and Tony Barbie. Their buyouts totaled more than $10 million combined. And Auburn is still paying out assistant coaches that work for Chizik to the tune of more than $8 million. So, gentlemen, here's Charlie Weis. What do we say about Charlie Weis? He's getting paid from Notre Dame, from Florida, from Kansas. And I don't know if he still gets anything from the Boston Patriots.
That would be the New England Patriots.
New England Patriots.
Like in the 1960s, they were the Boston.
Well, they just I think just deflated my image.
I think Charlie Weis is a perfect example of somebody who was meant to be a coordinator, and he was a brilliant offensive coordinator while he had Tom Brady as his quarterback, and then he kind of floundered in other places. You know, his agent and him did a great job after his first year at Notre Dame when he won with Ty Willingham's players.
Right.
And they floated the balloon out there that a bunch of NFL teams were interested in him, so they jacked his salary up. I think it's typical of colleges to overreact to both success and failure. Auburn did exactly the same thing with Gene Chizik. They won the national championship. I would argue more because of Cam Newton than because of Gene Chizik. But they won the national championship. They jacked his salary up, gave him a contract extension, and then 2 years later they fired him. That's why the numbers are so big.
Yeah, the market is strange that way. Tim, is it like that in baseball as well?
I don't think so. I think baseball's a little less visible, I think, than college football. So I think there's more of a long term to the coaches. One great point I didn't even think about the coaching staffs who are, paying them off as well. But it was kind of interesting because I think last year we talked a little bit about the athletes. That there was a movement. A scholarship should be for 4 years. When I was in college, if you didn't perform, you were out a year. But the college didn't lose anything; the student did. Mm-hmm. Apparently, it's not the same for the coaches.
No.
With these names right here, I think of coordinators. I think of coordinators, not head coaches.
And Tim made a good point about the assistants. Big time assistants now are making over $1 million.
Oh yeah, look at what Will Muschamp was getting up at Auburn,
right.
And it's a pretty good deal. To add a little bit of kerosene to the fire, I remember when I was at Auburn, Brother Oliver came on as defensive coordinator. He insisted that he was allowed to bring 3 off-field assistants who were paid. One of them did film breakdown for him. One helped him to construct the practice sessions and make sure some of the drills were done. And the other one dealt with overall defensive operations. They were never listed as full-time coaches, but they were paid as full-time coaches. And when Brother Oliver finally left, they had a buyout for him, but none for those 2 assistants. So the 3 assistants. So it's really, really a different world now than where we were just a few years ago.
And I think our focus here is obviously on sports, but it happens at universities in other areas as well. I remember when I was working at Auburn, there was an article in the newspaper one day. At that time, this would have been around 2003, 2004. Auburn University was actually paying a former president who had been not fired but asked to retire,
Right.
a former provost, an athletic director, Tommy Tuberville, Cliff Ellis, and Steve Renfro, who's the baseball coach. But the baseball coach was only like $150,000 a year. But still, $150,000 a year is 5 or 6 students tuition.
Sure.
And it is and Cliff Ellis was a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. They go to the Sweet 16 in 2002 or 2003, and they want to give them a contract extension. Give them a bigger salary, and a couple years later they have a losing season. They fire him, so now they're stuck with.
That brings up another very interesting question, because I was at Auburn that year, and after we went to the Sweet 16, the next year, because we had Chris Porter and Doc and all the others, Auburn was on the front page of Sports Illustrated, probably because of that. It was Chris Porter, doing one of his famous dunks. And I guess what it really amounts to, you both know the business of sport. If they did not make some kind of offer at that time, when a coach is, quote, hot, I think they believe that some other team or some other school would come in and try to gobble them away.
Sure.
So how do they, now maybe you may be absolutely right, it's a kind of overreaction when they say, well, we want you to stay, and here's an extension, and an extension, and an extension. But then sooner or later they're going to have to eat that. And I'm wondering if the great business minds behind some of these decisions really, really take into account that, look, this is the buyout clause, and we're going to have to eat it if it doesn't pan out. So I just wanted to take a look at that business model. But what are we saying to the players now? They're in almost open revolt. There's still the Bannon case. He's got a Bannon case. Bannon has to go again. There are 3 other contiguous cases that want to have a number of issues addressed. And apparently there's no shortage of money. Was the Pac-12 at last week's spring meeting, they divvied up the pot, and each school got $21 million. $21.8 million just for being there. And the SEC is down at Destin now, and they're going to announce how much each school gets. But with all that money, something seems to be amiss.
It really does. And I just going back, okay, a Division I football player, freshman, gets whatever they get, their head, right? So full rides. He doesn't perform, okay? You can no longer play football, but here's what, 3 years of the same scholarship money? Because that's what we're doing with the coaches, right? They're getting paid.
Man, if they have enough money. Well, look, Auburn seemed to have enough money to have a deficit of however millions of dollars, but to be able to put up the largest jumbotron TV in the world. Where do we go? What's going to happen? Your conjectures, man.
We're thinking about the athletes that get scholarships 1 year and don't perform. What happens to them? They're just go somewhere else. We're not paying you anymore. You can come to school to get financial aid, but
one of the things that the Big Five conferences, when they kind of did that breakaway thing last year from the NCAA, one of the things they talked about was having, in those 5 conferences at least, having the scholarship, four-year scholarships. And a few schools, I know Vanderbilt does. I think Florida does. There's a few schools in the SEC that are, if you get hurt, if you don't perform, you still get your scholarship. But another thing about when these coaches leave is a lot of kids, as educators, we like to take the high road and say, no, they chose to go to Notre Dame, or they chose to go to Auburn for Auburn University and for the educational opportunities. But that's nonsense. People go to Ohio State to play for Urban Meyer. People go to Auburn to play for Gus Malzahn. People go to Alabama to play for Nick Saban. And where does it end? Who knows? I think one thing that could kind of put a damper on the coaches' salaries is if somewhere down the road, one of the high courts or something decides that yes, we do have to start paying players, and that'll reduce the pot a little bit.
Yeah, and that's another can of worms. Sure. I don't like the phrase paying players because it's never going to. There may be some distribution of funds on an equitable basis, very similar to Pell Grants and so forth, from my estimation. But if we go down that road of saying pay, which is it's a monosyllabic, so it's easier to say. But
people go to University of Miami to figure out how to distribute those Pell Grants. Right?
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Will there ever be a day where someone in the financial aid office goes to the athletic director and says, "We have Charlie Weis until 2015, regardless of what happens."
Right. Yeah. It's really quite limited.
That's kind of scary.
I know. Is it really largesse by the coaches, or is it just what the market will bear? Is it kind of like the early stages, do we think, of this phenomenon? And in early stages, things always tend to seem like the old Wild West.
Yeah. Well, coming up here, I was thinking about the new Texas basketball coach from VCU.
Shaka Smart.
Let's say a couple of years, he doesn't do anything. He probably will never have to do anything because he'll get paid for whatever the length of the contract is. So
then the message is, in addition to being a good coach, you need to have a good agent.
Oh yeah.
Well, players aren't allowed to have agents. They are supposed. Their high school coaches are supposed to be de facto agents, but we know what the name of that game is. And is this going to open up, do you think, some more significant difficulties that the Power 5 and Notre Dame conference are going to face? I mean, everybody says, well, Title IX. Somehow or other they've been able to wrangle away from that. And I don't know. I think that if we're going to do anything like this, there has to be some type of index, and what we call the MRI in business, the marginal, whatever it is, an index that is used at the professional leagues to determine the value of that player to the team. Okay?
War.
And if we're to take the per capita cost versus income for any sport other than women's basketball, men's basketball, and football, it would definitely be a deficit. So how do we reconcile that? You know, that's more rhetorical
Yeah,
question. but-
and you mentioned the in the pros where they have the slots for players go in and things, but still even in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they can pay coaches whatever they want. You know, that doesn't
Right.
count against the salary cap, doesn't count against anything. If they want to pay a coach whatever they feel like he's worth, and you know, one of the things you can make a good argument. You know, coaches like Nick Saban, the data is out there that says the number of out-of-state students that have come to Alabama since Coach Saban's been there, has the difference in out-of-state tuition and in-state tuition is more than paid his salaries.
Oh, right, yeah, the whole argument about what big-time sports can do for a university is, the history of that is replete with schools like Notre Dame. It was little-known Midwestern Indiana school until Newt Rockne got there. Florida State before Bobby Bowden got there. You know what they still call the old guard down in Florida. You know what they still call Florida State, don't you? The girls' school.
As it used to be
Because it used to be a women's teachers college. So they still call it the girls' school, Florida State. We're not saying it, Jimbo, it's just there. At any rate, I think this kicks over a whole can of worms. I don't think that they're ever going to be able to resolve it until, as you suggest, the coffers start to dry up. And I don't see that happening because people are still spending unbelievable amounts of money. I never will forget, those of you who are not familiar with SEC football, because that's all I can talk about, that in Notre Dame, because the approaches are essentially the same by the fans. I can well recall the week that we played LSU at Auburn. There were certain parking areas that the people would come and they had to wait until a certain time to go to the specific parking areas. Tuesday, vans and Winnebagos and so forth started lining up. And you've been on the Auburn campus, you know what I'm talking about. And Bama week was just insane. I mean, they had the caravans starting to line up on Tuesday or parked in some of the open areas on Tuesday. So apparently the revenue is there. I mean, obviously the revenue is there. What to do with revenue is the next question.
That's a question for next week.
It's really a question, if Auburn can afford to do it, then pay the guy off and get someone else.
Right.
But some schools eventually are not going to be able to do that or can't do that. That's why
And I think that it's important to point this out, and I really like those of you reviewing to understand this. In practically all of the Power 5 conference schools, plus Notre Dame, perhaps BYU if they're going to be in something, it is not the institution's general fund which pays for athletics. The athletic programs at the Power 5, Notre Dame, those programs are paid for by football revenues. Make no mistake about it. They're paid for by football revenues. Basketball takes care of itself, both men's and women's. No other sports can cover the costs. And were it not for football, underwriting the cost for all sports, they wouldn't have any sports and would have to be subsidized by the general fund. I'm opposed to general funds being used for that purpose, but I'm probably a dinosaur. At any rate, the next time you hear someone say, Ohio State athletics lost millions of dollars in the revenues, just peek over and see how much profit was made by Ohio State football. And that's what pays for tennis, which I coached, for softball, for track, for all the other sports that are there. So please remember that. Gentlemen, concluding comments? Tim?
If schools do have the revenues to do this, they're very lucky. Again, I still think we're moving to treatment of student athletes being the same. So person doesn't perform, loses a contract, let's do something to reward him maybe for those years. That's what I'd like to see.
Pay them what you think they're worth. You know, I've said this before, people complain all the time about how much athletes make. They never complain how much entertainers make. And they make a lot more than athletes.
Right.
Whatever the market bears, you know, and we're not going back.
Yeah, it's not going to be a backpedal. Well, folks, thank you for joining us. And we want to thank you also for sending in your recommendations to sportstalk@usssa.edu. And until next week at 11:30 on Wednesday morning, this is Dr. Arthur Ogden saying goodbye for Sports Talk and the United States Sports Academy.